obviously you really want to do it. Wow. Did you see her latest book? The textbook. Is that all the students read? Students pick up something. Definitive. And your husband walked out. Do you know what husband the story is? You get up there? What's your remarks? He said that. You're the creator.
Check, check. Check.
Where's Philip? I think your grandchildren will be quite legal.
Where do you want to sit?
I have no idea, but I don't want to sit in the middle. I think Henry should sit in the middle. And yeah, if you want to. Okay.
Would you like to sit on the end or the second?
Wherever you tell me.
All right, why don't you sit on the end where it's most convenient?
Oh, okay.
Nobody has any remarks. That's not fair. It worked. I wanted to remember for some reason.
Yeah, well, you have a lot of names to remember. I just have to.
Well, I felt bad because I gave all my documents to the library.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I think compared to the documents, I don't think they have processed it yet.
Okay.
Okay. There are questions of interest.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming out tonight. This is the first night of our Civil Rights Conference 2025. My name is Henry Giles. I'm Assistant Professor of African American Studies in the History and Philosophy Department here. Welcome again. I'm the organizer for this year's conference, and I'm really proud about this tremendous milestone that we've reached. This is the silver anniversary, so to speak. This is the 25th anniversary of the Civil Rights Conference. I think that deserves a round of applause. I'm grateful to be involved with an institution that puts effort and supports the importance of understanding our differences and creating a space for real dialogue. That's what we will be doing this month. The Civil Rights Conference goes throughout the month of February. And now more than ever, I think we need that. We need that space for dialogue. Several months ago, when I was thinking about a conference theme, I was reflecting on the resilience that various groups have shown over the years. Nothing is gained without grit and sometimes a fight. That's not meant necessarily to celebrate the strength of a group, but it should make you think about the weakness of those who instigate the fight. With any struggle, there should be a lesson. What can we pass on to our students? And I see several of you here tonight. Thank you for coming. What can we pass on to our students and younger generations as they deal with the issues we had hoped they wouldn't have to? I was reminded of a song by India Ari from 2001 entitled Strength, Courage, and Wisdom. As the lyrics reveal, those things have been inside of us all along. I won't sing it. Listen to it. She says we have to step out on faith. I hope the messages throughout this conference will resonate with you as we try to navigate the road ahead. So this is what I ask you to do, to develop and encourage someone else to have strength, courage, and wisdom, lessons for the journey toward justice. This is the first of many events this month, and I hope you'll join us. You can see the full lineup on the website, utm.edu, and Civil Rights Conference. Tomorrow night, UT Martin welcomes award-winning journalist Charlene Hunter Galt, and she has quite the story. So I hope you all will come back for that. But tonight, we are going back to square one to see how this conference came to be. Again, thank you all for coming. I hope you will enjoy tonight, and Madison Jones will introduce us to our panel.
Good evening. My name is Madison Jones. I'm a sophomore majoring in criminal justice here at UT Martin. Tonight is the start of our Civil Rights Conference. Each year, the university brings trailblazers and exceptional people who have been on the front lines fighting for justice. It is a big undertaking. This is the 25th anniversary of the conference, and UT Martin holds a distinctive place in the academic world. We are the only university in the country that hosts a month-long conference dedicated to civil rights for all. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our panel of speakers. They are trailblazers in their own right because they have this region. Some of the panelists were here at the very start, and we'll hear about their early vision and mission for the conference. In essence, we'll hear stories from then to now. Our panelists this evening include Dr. Alice Catherine Carls, Professor Emerita of History. Dr. Carls taught in this history and philosophy department for 31 years. Dr. Henry Parker, Professor Emeritus of History. He taught in the history and philosophy department for 33 years. In 2023, UT Martin established the Dr. Henry Parker Speaker Series in his honor. The Honorable Tommy Moore, who is the Weakley County General Sessions Court Judge and friend to UT Martin. Dr. David Barber, Professor of History. Dr. Barber has taught at UT Martin for 20 years. He actually teaches me. I have a paper due by him. And Dr. David Coffey, Professor of History and Chair of the History and Philosophy Department. Dr. Coffey has served at UT Martin for 24 years. He will be the moderator for tonight's panel discussion. Please welcome them as we kick off the 25th anniversary of the Civil Rights Conference with the session From Then to Now.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, that's works. Thank you for being here. I'm David Coffey, and I am going to moderate this discussion tonight. And it's a real thrill for me because when I first arrived at UT Martin in 2001, I learned about the Civil Rights Conference, and I was thrilled that we were going to be doing that sort of thing. They had already had one, and Dr. Carls invited me to be part of the second one, and it was a life-changing experience for me, and I've been associated with the conference since then. So we'll go ahead and jump into it. It had to start someplace, and this seems like an unusual place for it to start. Rural West Tennessee, at a university that's very majority white. And yet, there was a need for it. And my colleagues saw that need and moved on it. We had a Civil War conference, and that seemed more logical, it seemed more attractive to the local population. And I'm a Civil War historian, I had no interest in doing that. So to be involved in the Civil Rights Conference was something special for me. So I would like to turn to my colleagues and friends and ask, let me start with you, Dr. Carls. Where did the inspiration come from?
Judge Moore has always been a big friend of our department. I came in 1992, and you were one of the first ones to support the department and with generous gifts of books for the students during the annual honors recognition of our students. And then in 1999, he came to me and he said, you know, I can offer you a list of speakers that is really, really awesome. And I know, and I have to look at my notes here, who was the main speaker who you suggested?
Well, can I even tell you why I even thought about?
Yeah, tell us how you
I watched a PBS documentary about the garbage workers strike in Memphis in '99, and I really had not known much about it, and it was an incredible documentary. And the thing that caught my eye was that I went to law school there in the 70s, and some of the very people that were in that video were still names of people that were still in the government, still involved in that area. And I thought that caught my eye, and I wondered what they were doing now and what was going on in their lives. And then about a week later, I went to a judges conference, and one of my friends, a judge from Memphis, Russell Sugarman, was there. And so I sat with him and talked to him for a couple of hours and asked him, had he been there in '68, and he had. He was a Harvard Law School graduate and came back and started the first totally African-American law firm there in Memphis, and filed a lot of cases that dealt with civil rights and discrimination. He was an advisor to Dr. King. I don't think he ever represented him, but he was an advisor to King. I had been to his office and saw pictures of he and Dr. King together. And so I asked him, I said, let me give you a list of the people that I saw in this documentary. How many of those people are still alive and still active in the community? And he gave me that list, and I wrote them down and brought them to Dr. Carls, and I said, we need to get some of those people here, for the students at UT Martin to be able to talk to them and hear them talk about an event that was a big part of the civil rights movement in this country. It was the last thing that Dr. King did. It was the last speech he ever made, and his assassination was there. And there are people that were involved in the movement that were there at the time that I think our students need to hear about. And that's kind of how I thought about it and talked to Dr. Carls about it, because she was the head of the department at that time, and I thought the place to go. And she was very receptive. And another person that I thought was very receptive to the idea was Dr. Nick Donegan, who supported it at the time, was the chancellor of the school. So
as a matter of fact, he was in the National Guard in 1968 in Memphis at the time. So he had the other perspective on, on that sanitation strike, and it was really quite interesting. And so I took it from there, and I took this proposal to my department, and we discussed it. And we had a Tom Elam conference, annual history conference. We had the money to bring speakers on various topics. And as Dr. Coffey said, sometimes those topics tended to veer on the Civil War. So we replaced war with rights. But we call it the Memphis sanitation strike. And we had a roster of absolutely outstanding speakers that first year, and Russell Sugarman and you did everything, you organized everything. All I had to do was to give the, reserve the rooms and get the logistics for the meal, for this, for that, for the parking, and it went very, very smoothly that first year. And because we still were a little bit short of money, I passed the hat and I went to see my dean, and my dean at the time said, I'm giving you money this year. That's $500. You remember when we invited Dr. Bond, Julian Bond, it was so much, wow. Okay, but $500, that's all we had then. And he said, just this year alone. Oh, yes, sir, yes, sir. And so we had our conference. And then the next year after that, Dr. Coffey came. Yeah. And I want to say Dr. Parker was involved from the very start in this. He was so supportive. And then we had another colleague, and I really want to give him a lot of credit, and that was Preston Hardy, who was an adjunct at the time. He was teaching survey courses, American history courses, and he used to come to his classes in his World War II aviator jacket. I don't know if it was his or his uncle's, but anyway, that made a big impression on the students. And so he sat me down and he said, you don't want just a one-time civil rights issue, you want to make it into a conference. And so we sat down and we drew the main line. And then he was amazing because he knew the history of civil rights in West Tennessee better than I did. And he was telling me, you need to do Somerville, Tent City, you need to do this, you need to do that. And so he kind of picked up, you brought the initial knowledge and the initial contacts, and then he was amazing. I think it was 2003, wasn't it, when we did Tent City, and he brought a U.S. Army tent. And
no, that was 2002.
2002. See, I keep forgetting.
That's when we did the Tent City conference.
Right.
And we had that set up.
The tent was set up in the front of this building, and it was a replica of the U.S. Army tents that were put in Somerville to house the black tenants and sharecroppers who had been kicked out of their homes in the fall of 1959, just after the crops were in, when frost came and it was cold and they had nowhere to go. And so the U.S. government brought the tents in, and then my colleague Preston Hardy brought a tent, and that really, invigorated the conference. And of course, by this time, I was no longer chair, but my successor had already gone to the Dean of our school and passed the hat. And what made this conference what made it possible for us to continue year after year was that we went to several units on campus, and several units gave us a little bit of money, and together we had enough to bring those outstanding speakers in. And the first years were kind of touch and go because we didn't know, if we would have enough money. But when you became chair, then, that was the support there. And I think I was there for about 7 years. And I want to stress again that the impetus or the idea that you gave us to recall the history, that struck a chord with me because I knew that the history of civil rights and African American history in West Tennessee had not been written that well or at all. And so what we did was to bring speakers who could document that history. And I think with Tent City, what we did, we went to Somerville, and we had Mrs. Viola McFerrin. She was a fantastic speaker. She was at the heart of that Tent City movement and the resistance.
A lot of the landowners were still alive.
Yes, we're still alive, and so it was fantastic. So we brought them, and then we started recognizing the first African American mayors, school principals, firemen, the fire chiefs, etc., representatives. Johnny Shaw was a big supporter. He came several years to the conference. Reverend Samuel Billy Kiles was there to talk about, he was there on our first speaker, and he came back. He was a friend of the conference. So it kind of grew organically, and the topics were kind of coming to us as we started exploring more of the history of West Tennessee. And so that was my part. And then, of course, at some point, Dr. Barber took over, because I felt kind of a little uneasy being the organizer of that conference when I was a white woman and a foreigner, and so it seemed more logical that Dr. Barber, who was at the time teaching African American history for us, would take the lead of the conference, and so he graciously accepted this, what had become a whole week. Oh, I have to say, we started with one afternoon and one day, and then it grew to 2 days and 3 days to a week. We had a week by the time, that Dr. Barber inherited the conference, and we had field trips. We were starting to do all kinds of exciting things. So, David, if you want to...
Let me turn to Dr. Parker briefly first, because he was in it from the start. Dr. Parker, what are your memories of the Civil Rights Conference starting here, and what did that mean for you as a faculty member?
I was just following along on her coattails, and it's pretty ironic that a lady born in France had such an interest in American civil rights activities in our country. She spearheaded, and she's kept that up since then, not only with the Civil Rights Conference, but other activities she's been involved in, like with black soldiers in the American wars, and she's written about it too, so I'm just her acolyte here.
You're a big supporter too.
Oh,
we
thank you.
sat down many times, and you helped me conceptualize many of the panels, and
Thank you.
And you're always there. You're always there.
Thank you.
That was one of the great things about the conference. It was always such a collaborative thing. we'd shoot ideas around and say, who can we get this year and who can we get? And we've got, over the years, we got people. Julian Bond, Diane Nash, Bobby Seale,
Michael Harper.
Michael Harper.
I mean, it's a who's who of African-American leaders.
It's been amazing. And
Oh, yeah.
then we did have a change in leadership with the conference, and David Barber stepped in to direct the conference, and it gained momentum and kept going, and we brought in a different set of speakers like Bobby Seale, and I'm not going to try to speak for David, but it wasn't always easy. We got calls. we got threats over the years because of what we were doing here. But David, talk about your time as the director.
Well, first of all, I did not graciously accept the position. I eagerly.
I don't remember that.
I eagerly accepted it. I
good.
grabbed at it.
I remember that, yes, that's
And
right.
I also, I didn't think it was strange that Dr. Carls would be a person who would play the role that she did. I didn't think it was strange precisely because she was not from here. And when you're not from a place, if you're a white person and you're not from America, you can see the racial outlines of this country, I think, a little bit better than most white Americans who are inured to the realities in which we live, who are blind to the realities in which we live. I always felt that the key element of the civil rights movement itself was the fact that it was a mass movement, the fact that it was people standing up for the first time and taking history into their own hands. And that's what I wanted to bring to UT Martin with the hopes that perhaps in meeting people who had actually waged the fight, that our students would take up that same mantle. I think the second person I brought in as chair of the conference was a man named James Lawson. How many people have heard of James Lawson?
Oh, that was awesome.
A handful of people in here. James Lawson was, together with Diane Nash, who I brought the same year for the first time. We brought her a second time as a keynote speaker. But James Lawson was the man who organized the Nashville students prior to the first sit-in in Greensboro, North Carolina. James Lawson was already organizing students in Nashville, including people like John Lewis, Marion Barry, who later went on to be mayor of the city of Washington, and a whole bunch of Bernard Lafayette, who Dr. Parker knew, a whole bunch of students. James Lawson organized them to engage in sit-ins, and they became the leadership of what became the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which was the single most important of the civil rights organizations. So it was exciting bringing Jim Lawson here because we took students out. There was the top of the line restaurant in Martin here. It was called the Opera House, now defunct, we took about half a dozen students together with James Lawson and with Diane Nash. And they just talked the whole time. Dr. King, what was Dr. King like? And it was one of the most rewarding experiences that I had. We did bring, as Dr. Coffey mentioned, we brought Black Panthers. The first keynote speaker that I brought was a woman named Kathleen Cleaver. Anybody heard her name? Kathleen Cleaver? Kathleen Cleaver was the Minister of Information for the Black Panther Party. And I think 6 or 7 years later, we brought Bobby Seale, who was the co-founder of the Black Panther Party. That was exciting because both those people, growing up, I was 18 in 1968. Growing up, these people were my heroes. And so I got to bring both Bobby Seale and Kathleen Cleaver. We brought Bob Moses. Anybody heard of Bob Moses? Bob Moses was the person who, more than anyone else, was responsible for the civil rights movement in the roughest state in the country, and that was Mississippi. And, you know, I don't want to take the time to talk about Bob Moses, the courage that he had, and that's what I wanted to expose our students to. Expose our students in order to help them see that the only way that change is going to happen is if you all make it happen. It ain't going to happen by, it's not going to happen if we wait on politicians. That's not what the civil rights movement did. What distinguished the civil rights movement, as I said a moment ago, was that it was a mass movement, that people stood up. That's what Martin Luther King appreciated about the civil rights movement. That's what he said distinguished it, that black people had stood up. He used men, black men stood up in their Olympian manhood and stopped simply accepting the dictates of white Southern society. David, I could go on.
Well, it's fascinating to me, all the people we've had here, from the first conference all the way to the recent years. But the things that I remember, and you were part of it, was I think it was the anniversary of Dr. King's assassination. We marched.
500 people in Martin, Tennessee.
500 people marched down University Drive here in Martin. It was breathtaking. It was stunning. And we had the police escort. We had people of all walks of life out there, and we could pull that off and do it in a peaceful and inspiring way. I thought it was one of the highlights of our.
You know, there was an event in Watkins. We marched down University Street. There was an event in Watkins, and I was not the organizer of the event, and I would not have approved of one of the speakers. I'm not going to name who that was, but it was a local preacher here who gave an absolutely awful speech and distorted Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail. But the thing that I remember about that conference was that one of our students was the co-host, a young woman named Brittany Reynolds. And there were police sitting right in the front row. This was pretty much at the time the Black Lives Matter movement was repeatedly going out into the streets. Not yet what it would be with George Floyd, but, and Brittany stood up, Brittany being the co-host, looked right at the police in the front row and said, if you're not openly condemning the police brutality, then you're complicit with it. Oh. That was the kind of courage that we all need. I was blown away because I wouldn't have had the courage to do that. But she did, and I was glad that she did, and it's an example that I would like to follow again and again.
Yeah, over the years, we've done a bunch of different themes, and from Tent City, we got to meet many of the people who were involved with that, and we actually won a national award for that conference. And then we, one year, Dr. Renee LaFleur was the director of the conference. Dr. Barber took a little break, and
I was on leave.
yeah, that's right, yeah. And Renee stepped in, and we did a focus on LBJ and the Great Society. And we brought in Dr. Mark Updegrove, who was the director of the LBJ Library. And that was a very informative conference and a well-attended conference. So we've gone all over the place. But I'd like to ask the four of you what your favorite memory was. Let me start with you, Dr. Parker. What was your favorite memory from the Civil Rights Conference?
I'll pass and come back later. Let me think.
Okay.
We've had so many good ones, it's hard to single out one,
All
but
right.
I'll come up with an answer shortly.
Okay. David?
I'll pass.
I've got my favorite. Go ahead. Judge Moore.
My favorite was the 2001 conference, and when we had the Reverend Billy Cowles here, and they had a luncheon, and Billy Cowles spoke at the luncheon. I don't know if y'all remember that or not, but I had the privilege of sitting next to him during the luncheon, and this is going to come as a shock to anybody that knows me. I really didn't eat. I just talked to him and listened to him. And but what a thrill that was for me. Billy Cowles, if you don't know, was a preacher, pastor at the Monument Baptist Church in Memphis during the garbage workers strike, and it was where Dr. King and Billy Cowles and Ralph Abernathy and Jesse Jackson were going for supper that night when King was assassinated. And the people that were in that room as Dr. King came out were Billy Cowles, Ralph Abernathy, and they were talking to Jesse Jackson in the parking lot below. And I think the last thing Dr. King did, according to Cowles, was to reprimand Jesse Jackson for wearing a turtleneck instead of a suit. So these are just the kind of things that you learn from somebody that was there. And while he was sitting next to me, I asked him, I said, tell me about it. Tell me about the assassination. And these are the things that he told me, okay? He said, I heard the shot, and I saw Dr. King fall, and I knew it was a fatal shot from the second I saw it. And he said that he and somebody else went in and got a sheet to put over him. But this is a point that I've read it since, but he said he went in and got the cigarette ashtray and dumped it in the toilet and flushed it, because in the last week or two, maybe a month or two before King was assassinated, he had started smoking. He was nervous, and he was concerned about some of the threats that he had received, and it was just something, and he didn't want anybody to know that he had started smoking. And he dumped that and cleaned that out, And then he said he picked up the phone to call the operator, and there were no dials on the phone. It was just to the operator at the hotel, and it was an African American lady there who was not at her post. She had come over and was standing near Jesse Jackson during it. She had a heart attack and died there, according to Reverend Cowles. And so they had trouble getting even an ambulance there because she wasn't at her post and unable. But things like that, just, you don't hear anywhere else but from a person who was there. But I'll never forget his speech that day at the luncheon. He said he came to Memphis and accepted the pastorate of the church at Monument Baptist because he wanted to be involved in the civil rights movement. And he said he had already been there to visit, and he was impressed with the church because there were several doctors who were members, several lawyers who were members, professors who were members. And he said, those are the kind of people that I wanted to try to inspire to be involved in the civil rights movement. And so I accepted the pastorate. And he said the first day that he preached there, he said, let's have a go down and sit in the front of the buses in Memphis, like Rosa Parks had done in Birmingham. And he said, who will do that with me in the morning? And he said, please raise your hand if you'll do that with me. And he said, literally the entire congregation raised their hands. And he said, including the lawyers and doctors and all these influential people. And he said when he went down there, it was just him and about 3 other people that showed up on Monday. And so he wasn't impressed with these influential people. And he said then it turned out to be the people who started the civil rights movement there were the garbage workers. Not the lawyers, not the doctors, but garbage workers, you know. And he said just before he had been there to speak to us, he had been in an airport in Philadelphia, and a young lady walked up to him. He said, a beautiful African-American woman walked toward him, and he said she caught his eye. And she came up to him and said, are you the Reverend Billy Cowles? And he said, yes, I am, you know. And she said, well, you're very important to our family. She said, my father and mother were members of your church at Monument Baptist. And she shared his name of her father. And she said, I'm a doctor, a medical doctor here in Philadelphia. And my father was a garbage worker in Memphis. And she said to him, because of your sermons, because of your influence, my father had a dream of me becoming a doctor, you know, a medical doctor. Wow. And then he said to us at that luncheon, he said, I didn't even know garbage workers had dreams, you know.
Wow.
And I'll never forget that. Wow. Because really, the people that are the movement, the masses of the movement are not, you know, professional people. They're people in the street. They're people that are suffering from the abuse of the civil rights abuses. And there were 1,300 garbage workers there. And James Lawson, that you were talking about, that we've had here, James Lawson gave a speech there in which he said that those garbage workers were men. They were human beings, and they deserved more than that. They were men, he said. And from that came this placard and sign that said, I am a man. Yeah. You know, I'm a man. And they didn't ask, you know, they just wanted to be treated like human beings. And, you know, that to me is the basis of the civil rights movement, really. I mean, we all need to be treated like human beings, you know, and we need to ignore the color lines. We just all need to be human beings and love each other as human beings. And that's what James Lawson taught. And, you know, I just finished, and I recommend the book, the latest biography of John Lewis, wonderful book. And I found out a lot more about his part of the civil rights movement, and so impressive. Probably beaten more than any other person.
We tried several times to get John Lewis.
But his hero was James Lawson.
Yeah.
And Lawson is the person who was his mentor, the person who taught him, and the person who was the inspiration to all those young people in Nashville that became nationally known. And everybody looked to Lawson for leadership. And he was, before Martin Luther King Jr., James Lawson was the guy. I mean, he was teaching, you know, you have to fight it with sit-ins. You have to fight it nonviolently. And they had these training exercises that were unbelievable. You know, before they went into the sit-ins, they were pouring coffee on them in the training, beating them in the training so that they would be able to handle it. Students like you guys, students who were going to go to a restaurant in Nashville and he wanted to make sure they would be able to just sit there and take it without acting, in retaliation. And that's James Lawson, who we've had here, you know. And you asked the question maybe in what you sent out, what was your vision of this? Well, my vision was just to start it, and have a few people here for people to know. And it was really for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, to make sure that we got as many people here as we could. It was never to be here 25 years, and it becomes something that went on for a month. I mean, but it has turned into something that's wonderful, And I'm a graduate of UT Martin, and I am proud of UT Martin. As an alumnus, I am proud that we have continued this, and I hope we'll continue it in the future.
We have plans.
And that, I totally agree with Dr. Barber in that it would be good for all of us to be activists. But the other thing I wanted the young people to learn and to see and to know is that all rights have been fought for, all of our rights. People have fought and died for our rights, and they have sacrificed their lives. They have sacrificed. I mean, I don't care what you think about Dr. King. He was 39 years old when he was assassinated.
And he had his life on the line every single day
Absolutely.
for 13 years.
And that, you have to be impressed with that in any person who does something like that for a cause, and for a cause that was right.
Absolutely.
And so I want all of us to understand how that people have sacrificed so that we can have what we've got, and we need to appreciate what has happened in the past, and understand that we don't need to take it for granted, and we need to act upon that, in our lives.
Thank you.
But
Catherine,
Dr. Kyles,
what's your big memory?
My favorite memory, and I have a few, but it has to do with meeting the speakers, our keynote speakers, because they were all absolutely outstanding individuals. But before I go there, I want to add to what Dr. Barber said and what Dr. Coffey said, that when I started the conference, my focus was clearly on West Tennessee, and we brought outstanding speakers from West Tennessee, and I'm going to mention 2 of them. And then Dr. Barber took it nationally, and I think now it has become international. I saw from the program this year, and I'm absolutely thrilled about that. And so the scope has broadened, and it has become more. Maybe I wanted to celebrate history too much and showcase history. That was to me a way to inspire, and Dr. Barber inspired by doing the marchings and bringing the passion and the engagement, the political engagement, and I think that was very good. So I've seen that change of direction in the Civil Rights Conference when Dr. Barber took over, and that has been continued, and Dr. Giles, who is now in charge of it, is continuing that spirit, and I think that's absolutely wonderful. But I want to share memories of 3 individuals, 2 of them from West Tennessee and one from Delaware, no, not Delaware, somewhere up north, and the Hudson River area. Okay. My first memory was in 1960, it goes back to 2004 when we did the Freedom Summer. And as our keynote speaker, I had chosen a gentleman from Jackson, and his first name escapes me. Maybe I put it down there. But I can look at my notes and talk, so you'll have to forgive me. But it was Reverend Cox, I think Ben Cox. And since he was in Jackson, he invited me very graciously to prepare for the conference, to introduce the conference to him. He invited me to come and sit to his house to discuss it. So I come to his house, and he excuses himself. He's going to get some refreshments in the kitchen. So naturally, I'm a little nosy by nature. So I start looking around. It was his office. And I see all the pictures of him with the leaders of the civil rights movements, and it's really impressive. And then I stop cold in front of a picture of a deer. And I knew that deer was the Cherokee deer. Why a Cherokee deer in an African American civil rights leader's office? So I asked him when he came back, and I'll never forget. And see, what I remember the most is the images. And he was a pretty tall gentleman, gray hair, very, very distinguished looking. So he put the tray down with the refreshments. And then all of a sudden, he looks like he was twice as tall as he was. And he looks at me and he said just those three things. I am African American. And he pauses to see, let it sink. I am Cherokee. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then the third one, I am Jewish. And I was like, oh, this is phenomenal. This is exactly what I want to do with the Civil Rights Conference. Oh my gosh. And we had Jewish leaders talking about their support of the civil rights leaders. And we had Cherokee civil rights leaders here. We had the whole thing. But to see him tell me that, I'll never forget that as long as I live. My second memory with one of the keynote speakers was Dr. Benjamin Hooks from Memphis, Benjamin Hooks Institute, and we were lucky enough to have him. And of course, his wife Florence was very protective of him because he was, he was very tired, he was very, very busy. And the conference time was coming near, and she said, well, he's not feeling very well, I don't know if he can come, etc. He went to the wire. And finally he comes, and he arrives here, and he looks like he has had a very busy day, like he's completely tired, exhausted. So at that time we had a dinner, and at the dinner we were giving out plaques and awards to the first African Americans who had held leadership positions in Tennessee, and so we have this whole thing, and he's there sitting at the table saying not much of anything, and he's, keeping to himself, and I'm thinking, is he going to make it through the evening? So we come here, and he was sitting there. I remember there were a chair for him. And he sits there, and he is literally sitting like this. And so, introductions, the podium was right there, same place that it is here now. Introductions, his biography, applause, and then, well, Dr. Hooks, this is your time to speak. And so he got up from his chair slowly, and I thought, oh my gosh, he's never going to make it. I was literally hanging onto my seat. He got to that podium, and he stopped. And see, this is something that I learned from this leader. He stopped. He looked at it was full, the room was full. And he took a deep breath. And again, how do you say that? He was maybe a little bit, okay, he got really standing tall, and he launched for, 45 minutes, do you remember?
Yes, it was powerful.
It was so powerful, and the voice that was coming out of him was booming, and it was like he was inspired. He wanted to get the message out, and that was so powerful. It was just incredible.
And when he sat back down,
Yeah, you remember that
yeah,
too?
oh yeah.
Oh yeah. So these are images that I'll never forget. And then the third one is from Michael Harper, Dr. Harper. We deviated a little bit from the maybe political or religious civil rights leaders to a poet. Michael Harper is one of the greatest poets of his generation. Yeah, you know him, great. Train, Coltrane, wonderful, jazz, great things. And so we invite him to come, and I wanted him to tell us how we can do civil rights in poetry. That was absolutely a fabulous experience. And same thing, a very imposing physical presence, but you wonder until the last minute, is he going to have the strength to speak? And same thing, he stood there at the podium, and it was so powerful. And when he started, and we have the CDs in the library. If they are cataloged, then you can go and hear him speak. And he was reading his poems, and they were about, again, you can talk about injustice in a family, injustice in everyday people. You can do that very powerfully in poetry, and that's what he did. And when he read his poetry, it was like, oh my gosh, hang on to your seats, because it was so powerful. So these are my three favorite memories.
Well done. Gentlemen, your turn.
I like what has been said, and I like history, but I want to share with the audience here that on the one hand, history is very, very important, but right now, you're going to have a chance to make history, and what are you going to do? I don't like what our government is doing to the people on the border. I don't like what they're trying to do with Medicare, with Social Security. They want to gut it. I don't like what they're doing with DEI. Are you guys up to the challenge of fighting against government forces that want to unravel these things that are really American and that have helped millions, or will you cowardly sit back and do nothing? See, it's one thing to sit and listen or read books about this, but it's another one to be on the front line, because when you're on the front line, you've got to risk your reputation, and most people aren't afraid to risk that. Well, what are they going to say about me? Am I some, oh, the word is anathema now, a liberal or a Democrat? Are you willing to risk your job for what you believe in? Are you willing to risk your life? Now, if you can say yes to all three of those, then you are a very courageous person. But the way we train our youth is to be cowards,
Yes.
to be subservient, to follow the crowd, obey the leader, and to have no guts. See, this would be a good time for Socrates to be alive, because he fought against all of these things. And so your challenge now is this. We're in a new paradigm shift here. Things that we thought were constitutional and American are now considered un-American and unconstitutional. Will you have the courage to stand up and say, no, this isn't right, and I will fight you on this. I will get out on the front lines and do whatever I have to do, risk whatever I have to do in order to make it right. Now, this takes a lot of guts, and I just wish you could have heard some of the civil rights leaders who did this, like Bernard Lafayette, my friend. I lived with Bernard Lafayette for a while, and of course, I was one of Jesse Jackson's top aides. And so every day, you don't know if you're going to see a bed that night, because you can be shot at any time of the day. When I worked for Jesse Jackson, I was always vigilant, and I would always try to figure out, if an assassin comes, can I get in front of him in time to catch the bullet? So I'd look to the left, look to the right. I would take the bullet for him. So that's the kind of courage that we're talking about. There's no time anymore for cowardice. But we're at a time now where we don't know what America is going to be like in a few short years. I mean, our democracy is in jeopardy. We could end up with anarchy, or we could end up with dictatorship. So if you can do what the students did during the Vietnam era, they stood up and they said, no, we're not going to let you do this, Johnson. We're not going to let you do this. We will stop it. And they did, thank God. So that's the kind of courage that we need today, and that's the kind of thing that we sorely need to teach our children. There are some things more important than living. There are some things worth dying for.
Thank you. Dr. Barber, you...
I wanted to follow up on what Henry just said, Dr. Parker just said, because what Dr. Parker said is absolutely right. And although we don't like to talk about these kind of things here, when Dr. Parker said, you are being trained in a certain kind of way, he was not wrong. We are being trained in passivity. In this institution, we are being trained in passivity. And several months, just as an example, our university mission statement here at UT Martin is, I don't know if you're aware of it, it's a one-sentence mission statement. A mission, this is what we claim that we do to the world. The University of Tennessee at Martin educates and engages responsible citizens to lead and serve in a diverse world. I don't see it. I don't see it here at UT Martin. I don't see that that's what we're doing. We're not doing that. Do I have evidence? I certainly do. Most of the students at this university do not follow the news. If you do not follow the news, there's no way that you can be a responsible citizen.
We're getting a little off topic.
Well, I don't think we're getting off topic. This is about the Civil Rights Conference.
It is about the Civil Rights Conference, yes, and I would like to get it back to the Civil Rights Conference.
The purpose of the Civil Rights Conference was to energize, as I understood it, was to energize our students, to give them the kind of insight and courage that the civil rights movement exhibited, and to use that courage in a way to change their society. Well, changing our society, it's one thing to think about what's going on in Washington, D.C., where we have very little power at this point. It's another thing entirely to think about what we can do right here on this campus to make this a campus that serves the needs of our students in becoming the courageous people that Dr. Parker was talking about. So that's how I tie that together.
All right, well, that's what we've done with the Civil Rights Conference over the years. Yes, Dr. Parker?
I'll give an example to students and ask you what you would do in a situation like this, okay? I used to work on the railroad. I was a waiter on the railroad. I traveled 1 million miles on the train. One of the cities that we passed through was a place called Spokane, Washington. So one night, the waiters, I was a young waiter, I was a rookie, and so they set me up. They said, Parker, we want you to get off the train, go over to the bar across the tracks, and get us a couple of 6-packs of beer. And because the beer on the train is more expensive. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And so I jumped off the train, and I went into the bar, and this is an all-white bar, and as soon as I hit the door, and I've got to use the N-word, but I got to tell you that, everybody in the bar said, nigger, get out. Nigger, get out. And so as they said that, I kept going closer to the bar, give me a 7-Up. I don't drink. And so I said, if you're going to get me out of here, you're going to have to take me out. So one guy took this hand, this arm, one guy took the other, and they dragged me out of the bar. And I'm 2,000 miles from home. I don't know a soul here. I went out, I said, where are the Negroes in this town? And somebody said, they're out, it's the 4th of July, they're out at the park. I went out to find them, they were all drunk at the park. And so I said, well, I'm dead, I can't do anything tonight, but I'm coming back. When I got back to Minneapolis where I lived, I wrote a letter to the mayor of Spokane and to the governor of Washington and explained the incident, and I said, I'm requesting a public apology, and I'm coming back to see you. And so 2 weeks from then, I went back there, but I couldn't wait. I was so mad, I couldn't wait for the meeting with the mayor the next morning. I went back to that bar that night. And this time, not only did 2 guys take me out, see, one of them pulled out his coat. He said, I'm a detective. He said, I said, I'm calling the police. He said, well, no, I'm taking you out. I'm the police. And they threw me out of the bar. And so after writing a letter to the governor of Washington and the mayor, I got another meeting, and I was able to get the mayor and the governor to come together, and we desegregated all the bars and restaurants in Spokane as a result.
What year was that?
So once you get on mission where you feel that right is right and nothing can stop you from pursuing it, then your life doesn't matter. So that didn't even dawn on me that they could have shot me to death out there that night, you know, but that didn't even faze me at the time. Now, I wish I had been sensitive enough to sue the company, the city of Seattle and West Spokane and get some money, but I just wanted an apology, that's all, that my idealism left me with.
One of my favorite memories of the Civil Rights Conference is Dr. Parker telling that story.
Oh, I told you that story? Okay.
No, just now. Now that's my favorite memory of the
I
Civil
see.
Rights.
Dr. Giles, you have to invite Dr. Parker to tell his stories, plural, because he has...
Well, David, I've got to tell you my favorite story about Dr. Moore. We moved here in 1990. Now, when we moved here, I asked a preacher, he was an Oak Grove Baptist Church preacher, I said, can Martin handle an interracial couple? He said, yes, they can. Well, he lied. And so I found out that if my wife and I had an accident, then we couldn't be buried in the same cemetery. There's a cemetery for blacks and one for whites. And I said, oh my God, what am I going to do? And so I talked to the judge about it. He said, look, I will allow you to be buried together in Dresden, but the ceremony will have to happen after dark. And so I never forgot that, but...
That was said in jest. He would have been able to be buried there, both of them, at the Sunset Cemetery.
All right, well, that's quite a pun, a sunset, all right.
Yeah.
At any rate, that was my story there, but luckily, years later, I went back to Martin, and they do now allow us to be married in the cemetery in Martin, east side. Then I went up to Dresden, talked to them, and I can be buried there too. But you guys realize as you go down the highway, going from here to Memphis, all those cemeteries you see on the highway were segregated. So that would, now this is not true today, but that's the way it was in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. 80s up through the 90s, segregated all the way. And so when I pass one, I always say, any blacks buried here in, in these towns that we pass through? And the answer is usually no.
I'll say this, the Moores have 12 plots, and only 2 are filled right now. You can use 2 of those.
I appreciate it.
How's that?
Okay, we want to die together.
All right.
Well, I'll tell you another story. I'll tell you another one.
So you'll be buried right beside me.
Let me tell you this
That's the only
story.
thing you'll have to get.
We came here, as I said, 1990, and we were looking for a house. And so we finally decided on a house that we liked, but the realtor said, I can't sell you this house outright. She had to go to every person in that neighborhood, it's called Glenwood here in Martin, and ask their permission for a black guy with a white wife to live in that neighborhood. And she came back and just happily, they all said it was okay, you're okay. And so we got to stay there.
All right. Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to wrap it up with a Q&A. If anybody has any questions, we have a microphone out there on the floor. And just make your way to the microphone if you have a question for any of our panelists or a memory of the Civil Rights Conference you'd like to share. If not, I'll tell you about one of my memories. The second Civil Rights Conference. I got on a bus with my friend Debbie Boyd, longtime employee here, and a bunch of sorority girls from the Delta sorority. A lot of red. And we drove down to Somerville. But on the way down, they played a DVD of Medea. I'd never heard of Medea or Tyler Perry. But I learned all about it that day. And we had such a good time. And then we got to meet icons, people who had lived through the tent city experience. Hartman Jameson, as you mentioned in your research. Mrs. McFerrin, spectacular people. And we heard about living in canvas tents in the wintertime. You know, canvas doesn't stop bullets. The Klan would drive by and pop off shots and stuff. We heard about all of that. And that was so meaningful for me and for those young women on the bus. So we've done some good stuff with the conference over the years, and we're going to continue to do good stuff with the conference going forward. So any questions? Yes, sir.
I have a question for the students out here. How many of you are Christian? Could I see your hands? All right. Now, there's a book which has a term that's still relevant today, and that term's called doublethink. Does anybody remember that term, doublethink? That's the ability to hold two contradictory beliefs and believe them at the same time. One of the big issues in Christianity in the South is we live by doublethink. So on the one hand, we can say we love Jesus, who said to love your neighbor as your brother, and on the other hand, we can be separatists and segregationists. The First Baptist Church here in Martin did not allow blacks to enter until 1968. So the challenge to you now is not to indulge in doublethink. If you're going to be whatever you're going to be, then be that person and don't let anybody dissuade you from being that. I was a Catholic once, and I studied to be a priest. I was in a monastery for 3 years. But I left the Catholic Church because I didn't believe in their doctrines. But when I left it, that's what I said. I don't believe this anymore, and I'm not going to profess to do so. So I'm not going to be the advisor to the Newman Club, and I'm not going to Mass anymore. I left. So have the courage of your convictions, and whatever it is you say you really stand for, then actually stand for that and let nobody, no matter who that person is, persuade you otherwise. That's the best message I can give you, and it comes back again to the whole notion of docility.
Yes.
And what scares me so much now is you're in a position now where you are going to face these challenges. There are people out there who think they are arch Americans and they don't even believe in America. There are people who say Christianity is my life and they're unchristian. So will you stand up when this happens so that you will not hurt innocent people and allow the dictators and braggarts to run over the little people of the world?
We have a question or a comment?
I have a question. We're talking about the history of the Civil Rights Conference here at Newmark from pioneers. And we are doing that, we are having this conversation in a very sticky kind of era right now with the whole anti-DEI affecting federal governments being shut down, federal governments being shut down in universities, whole departments are being shut down in universities around the United States. And so thinking in terms of the Civil Rights Conference going forward, have there been conversations here on this campus? And I think about the Women's and Gender Equality Center as well. Are we going to be able to continue having a Civil Rights Conference? Can we plan it? Are we looking forward? Are we looking to the future? I guess is my question.
I don't think that's something we can answer tonight. I think it's our intention. It's definitely our intention to keep the conference going, keep the women and gender, the Center for Women and Gender Equality up and running, to keep an African American Studies minor, to keep a Women and Gender Studies minor. We're committed to those things, but we're only as strong as our legislature allows us to be when it comes to curriculum and programming. And a lot of it comes down to our leadership, and right now our leadership is, at least the campus leadership is committed to maintaining the conference and maintaining the programs we have. That's all I can really tell you today, but it's we've got some uncertainty ahead of us for sure, but we can learn a lot from the Civil Rights Conference, from the Civil Rights era and the people who changed America during that time. And so I don't think there's a better, more meaningful time to learn about.
I agree with that. There's no better time to learn about that than right now. But I do want to differ with you, David, on, and perhaps it was not well thought out, but all we have is not what's going on in the legislature, and all we have is not our administration. What we have is you, the people in this audience. The lesson of the civil rights movement is the civil rights laws in 1963. Martin Luther King went to John F. Kennedy, and John F. Kennedy was president of the United States at the time, went to John F. Kennedy and said, "We need a meaningful civil rights bill." And Kennedy said, "Not going to happen. We don't have the votes in the legislature." The struggle in Birmingham, Alabama, however, made the civil rights bill. And then the following year, at the end of 1964, Lyndon Johnson was president of the United States. And Martin Luther King said to Lyndon Johnson, "We need a Voting Rights Act." And Lyndon Johnson said, "I agree with you, but it's not going to happen this year." The struggle in Selma made it happen. It was people in the streets that made it happen. If we're going to defend what little exists in this campus and in this society, it's going to be only us who are going to force that issue.
All right, thank you. I believe, Dr. Bibby, did you have something to say? I'd like to introduce the Dean of the College of Humanities and Fine Arts, Dr. Jeffrey Bibby. He's fairly new to us, but he's already making big things happen, and couldn't be more thrilled.
As we were walking in, I said to Dr. Carls that I'm excited for a moment to not be a history professor, but to be a history student. And so thank you to the entire panel and to you, Dr. Coffey, for moderating, for educating me on this wonderful event and all of the things that you've done to make it happen. And that I think I can speak for everyone here, that we're all leaving really understanding that no matter how this conference has been organized, who was leading it, the speakers that were here, at the heart of it was always to inspire conversation and action and furthering of the cause of civil rights. Dr. Parker, Judge Moore, and Dr. Carls, if you'll come over here and join me. The organizing committee would like to recognize the three of you as truly original folks whose inspiration and dedication have made this event possible, and it's really why we're here. And Dr. Giles is going to come up on the stage and help me with this. She's going to bring some. Please, if you'll come over here, I think Nathan will get a much better picture over here. He wants to see you too. Dr. Carls, this is for you. Dr. Parker. Thank you. Here you go, sir. And Judge Moore. So these plaques basically recognize your dedication and your vision to making this event possible 25 years ago. And I hope that it's something that you can place where you can remember what you've done and how many people you have inspired and the work that hopefully we will continue to do and to continue to make you proud. you'll want to get some pictures. But Dr. Coffey and Dr. Barber, please don't feel left out. Why don't you come join Dr. Giles? So you have to join them too. You didn't realize you were going to do that. So here's the challenge when you give people plaques and recognize them, is the language has a tendency to be in the past tense. And the three of you are not done. Because this is the 25th anniversary, but ideally this is just maybe a midpoint, or really just very much a start of this. Because as we know, the conversation about civil rights is very much ongoing for a variety of reasons. So this is presented to the three of you to take back to your colleagues in the department. And I hope that what this will be is a reminder of what you've done, but also maybe a challenge to continue to do this regardless of the circumstances that we face. So I present this to the three of you. Thank you all for your work. This is a great event. I would like for you all to thank them again for their work. And I'm going to give the microphone to Dr. Giles to send us.
I just wanted to make an announcement before we close, and that is that on Monday in the Humanities Auditorium at 6 p.m., we will be showing episode 8 of the most significant documentary series of the Civil Rights Movement. And that episode 8 will focus in on the urban uprising, sometimes called riots, in Watts in 1965, in Chicago in 66, in Detroit and Newark in 1967. These are very powerful documentaries, and we'd like to see all of you there. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming tonight. I think this was a tremendous way to start the conference. The stories were incredible, and I love listening to you all talk about how this conference has grown. And so for our students in the audience, I hope you were maybe taking notes, jotting down some of the names. You might not be familiar with them, but let me just tell you, they are on par with probably some of your favorite entertainers. Back in the day, that's how these people were regarded, and we have had them on our campus. I think that's so incredible. So thank you all again. As I said, tomorrow we will welcome journalist Charlene Hunter Galt. I hope you all will come and hear her, and there are so many other events that are awaiting you in February. So thank you all again. Have a good evening. Be safe.